Have you ever wondered what truly limits you as a human being? Is it circumstances, the past, or the fear buried deep in your mind? Perhaps the limits do not lie in the external world, but within yourself. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He realized that the limits we face are not external walls, but internal shadows, the patterns, memories that silently control our lives day by day. But Jung also emphasized that the mind is not a prison, but a labyrinth. Within it are hidden both your limits and your boundless potential. They are doors, each one leading you closer to your true essence, to the power you have never dared to touch. Training the mind is not about controlling it, but a journey of confronting the shadows, recognizing the archetypes living within us, and awakening the forgotten parts of the soul. It is learning to turn inward, so that when the outside world is in chaos, you still stand firm from the center of yourself. If you are reading these lines, it means that somewhere within you, a quiet movement is beginning, an urge to break through old limits, to look deeper into yourself. In today's video, you will understand why fear, doubt, and wounds are not enemies, but guides. You will see that freedom does not lie in controlling the world, but in understanding and reconciling with your own mind. So, take a deep breath, because from here, we will step together into the labyrinth of the mind, where you will not only find answers, but also rediscover your infinite self. Are you ready? Number 1. Understanding the limited mind and the nature of the unconscious. Some limits do not come from the external world, but from the thoughts we repeat every day. They are not loud, not obvious, but they silently shape our entire way of living, loving, and responding to life. That is what Carl Jung called the unconscious, a deep region of the mind containing all that we have never recognized. And it is precisely there that the real limits begin. The limited mind is not weak, but a mind severed from its own unconscious part. When we do not see our whole self, we live only in a small fragment, the conscious part, where we think we know everything. But according to Jung, human consciousness is like a small lamp in the vast sea of night that is the unconscious. The part we see is only the surface of the iceberg. The part hidden below is what truly determines the direction of our lives. Try thinking of the times you repeat a mistake, even though you know you shouldn't. You promise yourself you'll change, but then return to the old path. Or when you feel anxious, afraid of abandonment, even though reason knows there's no threat. That is not a weakness, but the unconscious directing of behavior. Those buried memories, wounds, and fears return in the form of emotions, choices, and reflexes. We don't realize it, but they are the program silently running inside the mind, making us repeat the same script, just in different settings. Jung called this the repetition of the unconscious. An adult carries within them a childhood that has not been healed. A person confident on the outside may harbor inside a child once rejected, always fearing they are not good enough. The unconscious is not the past that has passed, but the past still living in the present. And as long as we have not recognized it, we are still living within the limits it creates. The true limits of a human being are not circumstances, but identification with the narrow ego, the part of the mind that always believes it must control, must prove, must protect its own image. The ego is like a small, bright room where we feel safe because we can see everything. But outside that room is an entire vast house with unopened doors, forgotten rooms. That is the unconscious. We think we are living fully, but in reality, we are only in a small corner of ourselves. When you believe I cannot change, I am not good enough, or this life is already destined, that is not objective truth. That is the voice of the limited unconscious, formed from old beliefs, from experiences you have never revisited. It is like faulty software, but because you don't recognize it, you let it control the entire system. Imagine the mind as a garden. Every thought, every memory, every emotion is a seed. Consciousness is the gardener, and the unconscious is the soil where everything takes root. You may not remember every seed you have sown, but they still grow, silently shaping the landscape of your life. When that soil is full of seeds of fear, regret, or resentment, you will see the world through their dust. But when you begin to become aware, observe, and work with the unconscious, that garden can bloom again. The amazing thing is that the unconscious not only contains shadows, but also hides every unrealized potential. Within it are creative instincts, intuition, and wisdom that transcend reason. Jung believed that each person has within them the self, the whole being, where all conflicts are reconciled, where potential becomes reality. But to touch the self, we must pass through the first door, understanding the limits of the mind. Limits do not disappear by denying them. They only dissolve when we look straight at them, without fear, without judgment. Many people try to flee the shadows by working more, pursuing success, seeking recognition. But the more they run, the longer the shadow grows. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment does not come from imagining light, but from seeing the darkness. A classic example is successful people who still feel empty. They think they have overcome limits, but in reality, they have only changed their form. Outside is control. Inside is the fear of losing control. The limited mind does not lie in circumstances, but in your level of awareness of yourself. Modern science is also gradually touching this truth through studies on the subconscious and behavior. Many experimental studies show that most behavior occurs automatically and unconsciously, rather than through deliberate choice. When you realize that, you are no longer a victim of habits, but begin to become the observer of your own mind. Notice how you react when someone criticizes you. The burning sensation, the defensiveness, the shame, all happen in an instant. That is not will, but unconscious instinct activated. If you pause and ask, "What part of me does this really touch?" you are taking a small but immensely important step out of the limited zone. When the mind begins to observe itself, the first freedom appears. You are no longer swept into the stream of reaction, but begin to see its structure. You see clearly the repetitions, the bindings, and even the irrational beliefs that once dominated you. In that moment, the unconscious begins to become illuminated, and as light shines in, the limits gradually dissolve. Sometimes, just one moment of awakening is enough to break a limit that has existed for years. The moment you realize, this is not me, this is just a wounded part of me. At that point, you are no longer a victim of the mind, but the one observing it. And from that point, every change can begin. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That is not just a reminder, but an invitation. an invitation to return inward, to look back at your mind not with fear, but with courage. For only when we accept looking into the dark region of ourselves do we truly understand what light is. Understanding the nature of the limited mind is not the end of the journey, but the first door opening to the inner world, where the unconscious is no longer a forbidden zone, but a map leading to true freedom. And only when we step through that door can we begin the journey to become infinite, not by the power of the ego, but by the awakening of the soul. Number 2. The shadow. After we realize that our greatest limits do not lie in the external world, but within our own mind, the real journey has only just begun. For when the light of awareness begins to flicker, it will illuminate the dark region we have avoided for so long, the part that Carl Jung called the shadow. If the limited mind is the walls we do not see, then the shadow is the guardian of the key to freedom. It is not an enemy, but the first door leading to wholeness. Jung believed that in every person, beyond the conscious part we proudly display outward, there always exists another part: instincts, raw emotions, fears, desires, envy, and even rejected longings. They are pushed down to the depths of the unconscious because we are taught that should not exist. From childhood, we learn to split ourselves in two: the bright part, accepted, and the dark part, denied. We learn to be the right person to the point of straying from our true selves. The shadow does not disappear when denied. It only buries deeper, grows stronger, and manifests in ways we do not expect. Try noticing. The things that make you hate others the most are often the parts you dare not see in yourself. When you get angry at a selfish person, there may be a part of you craving to put yourself first for once. When you criticize others for being weak, it may be because inside you also fear weakness. This is the mechanism of projection that Jung described. We cast the parts of ourselves we do not accept onto others, so we do not have to face them in our own soul. Thus, the world around us is sometimes not reality, but a mirror reflecting the inner self. The paradox is that the more we try to deny the shadow, the more it controls us. A person who always says, "I never get angry," may be the one being devoured by anger in the unconscious. A person who always wants to control everything is often the one most deeply afraid of losing control. The shadow is like an underground river. You can build a dam to block it, but the water's force will still find a way to overflow elsewhere. It will appear in dreams, in impulsive behaviors, in repeating hurtful relationships, or in the nameless emptiness you cannot identify. In psychotherapy, there are many thought-provoking cases about this mechanism. A man who always appeared moral, living by principles, never admitting anger or personal desires. But the more he lived properly, the more exhausted and directionless he felt. Every time someone acted freely, candidly, he would get inexplicably angry. After therapy, he realized he was denying the shadow, the part craving to live truly, to rebel, to express the instincts suppressed for so many years. When he dared to admit it, the anger vanished, and a new source of vital energy flooded in. Jung once said that in what we fear most, the greatest treasure is hidden. The shadow does not only contain the negative, but is also the source of power, creativity, and authenticity that we have not dared to live. Every human quality has two sides. Courage can turn into arrogance, sensitivity can become weakness. But if denied, they vanish along with our vital energy. Only when we learn to recognize, accept, and reconcile with the shadow do we reclaim the fragmented energy of our soul. Modern psychology calls this process shadow integration. Not purifying or eliminating the bad part, but learning to dialogue with it. The shadow is like a forgotten child. It screams, rages, not to destroy, but to be seen. When you sit down, listen, and ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" the shadow begins to calm. It is no longer an enemy, but a guide. Many people think that the spiritual journey is a become whole. For only light gives us faith, but only darkness gives us strength. Light makes us smile, but darkness makes us grow. And the process of confronting the shadow is not to become perfect, but to become real. To no longer live as a fragment, but as a complete being. Number 3. Archetypes and the power of the unconscious. When you have dared to look into the shadow within yourself, when you no longer fear the instinctual, angry, or weak parts once rejected, that is when the second door of the inner journey opens, the door leading to the world of archetypes. If the shadow is the repository of the forgotten personal parts, then archetypes are the primordial patterns of the human soul, the forces that shape how we love, fear, desire, and live. Carl Jung viewed the collective unconscious as a layer deeper than the personal unconscious. It does not belong to any one individual, but is the shared psychological repository of all humanity, containing symbols, stories, and images repeated over thousands of years. Jung said, "The archetype is like the bed of a river, through which the water of life flows. It is no longer the same water, but the bed remains the same." Meaning that archetypes are like ancient riverbeds, through which the waters of human life continuously flow, changing the surface, but preserving the deep underlying current. And it is precisely those invisible currents that silently guide us every day. We do not live in a void, our minds are woven from countless stories. When we love someone, we often do not love only their real self, but the archetype they evoke in us, perhaps the mother, the savior, or the betrayer. When we fear failure, sometimes it is not a present fear, but the echo of the victim archetype speaking through us. When we crave to prove ourselves, we may be living in the hero archetype, always seeking victory to affirm our worth. We think we are free, but in reality, we are reenacting ancient stories buried deep in the collective unconscious. Imagine, within you exists an entire universe of characters coexisting: the nurturing mother, the fighting warrior, the innocent child, the wise sage, the cunning trickster. Each archetype carries its own power, lesson, and peril. When one archetype dominates, we are swept into its role. Someone living in the savior archetype cannot bear to see anyone suffer. They forget their own boundaries and give too much. Someone dominated by the martyr may continually sacrifice themselves for others, mistaking it for love. But it is actually a deep-seated fear of abandonment in the unconscious. At this point, pause for a breath. Try closing your eyes and feeling, which pattern is living most strongly in you right now? The savior, the wanderer, or the child waiting to be held again? Just recognizing it, you have begun to touch the deepest part of the unconscious. Jung did not see archetypes as psychological labels, but as living entities in the mind. Every time we dream, we are communicating with them. Notice recurring dream images: a stranger leading the way, an old house, an endless battle, or a child calling you back. Those images are not random. They are symbols the unconscious uses to speak to you. Psychologist James Hillman once said, "Dreams are the voice of the soul. When you listen, you are listening to the archetypes active within you." Modern science, though not using Jung's symbolic language, touches this concept in another form. In neuroscience, researchers have discovered that the human brain is programmed to recognize patterns. We constantly seek structure, forms, and meaning in the world around us. This is the biological basis for our response to archetypes. Ancient stories, myths, films, and even modern video games move us deeply because they awaken the dormant archetypes within us. When you watch The Lion King and are moved by Simba's journey, it is not random emotion. You are touching the hero and divine father archetypes in the collective unconscious. Jung said that the task of life is individuation, becoming oneself by reconciling the archetypes rather than letting them dominate. Each archetype has a light and dark side. The mother can become nurturing, but also smothering. The hero can save the world, but also destroy oneself in illusions of power. When we become conscious of which role we are living, we begin to have the freedom to choose, not pulled by an ancient script anymore. A woman once shared in therapy that she always felt compelled to save everyone, from her partner, friends, to colleagues. She was always exhausted but could not stop. Delving deep into the unconscious, she realized she was living in the great mother archetype, an image idealized by culture and family. She once believed love meant sacrifice, but upon recognizing it, she began to see the dark side of this archetype: control, enmeshment, and the fear of worthlessness if not saving someone. Only when she dared to step out of this pattern did she begin to live as a free human, loving without carrying the burden. Archetypes cannot be eliminated, but they can be transformed. When we reconcile with them, the energy New question arises: how to make all those parts stop conflicting and become a unified whole? The answer lies at the heart of Jung's philosophy, in the journey he called the process of individuation, the path back to the true self, where we are no longer a fragmented piece of ourselves, but a whole, awakened, and free entity. According to Jung, most people live lives controlled by unintegrated psychic fragments. One part wants safety, another rebellion. One craves love, another fears hurt. One seeks meaning, while another just wants to forget the pain. Each fragment claims to be I, but the I we believe is real is actually the ego, a small center of consciousness formed from memories, beliefs, and social roles. Jung called the ego the inhabitant of the house, but not the whole house. Behind the doors the ego dares not open lies the entire unconscious, where the shadow, archetypes, and intuition reside. Individuation is the journey of reconciling the house and the inhabitant, the ego and the unconscious, the person you think you are, and the person you truly are. Importantly, individuation does not mean becoming special or separate. On the contrary, it is inner unity, where every part of the soul is accepted, placed in its right position, so you live without being torn by inner conflict. When you begin this journey, life often becomes chaotic. For what has been repressed rises to be seen. Just as when cleaning an old attic, dust, relics, and shadows must be brought to light before the house becomes clean. In practical psychology, this is the stage many describe as the identity crisis, when everything once meaningful suddenly feels empty. Career, relationships, and life values all seem to collapse. But in the Jungian view, this is not an end, but a sign of transformation. The ego is dissolving to make way for a broader awareness. Jung called this the sacred confrontation between the temporary ego and the eternal self. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. The old skin is not wrong, it just no longer fits. The snake cannot carry it if it wants to grow. Similarly, in the individuation journey, you too must shed old definitions of yourself, beliefs that once protected you, but now have become prisons. I must be strong. I cannot fail. I am not lovable if not perfect. All those statements are skins you once needed, but now it's time to release them to birth a new form. A classic example can be seen in those who change careers midway, leaving stable jobs to pursue true passion or purpose. On the surface, it is a bold decision, but deep inside, it is a manifestation of the individuation process. When the soul can no longer tolerate the split between what I do and who I am, it demands unity. And if that person listens to the call, they are stepping onto the path of becoming themselves. Jung called it the call of the self, a call everyone hears at least once in life, sometimes in pain, sometimes in emptiness, sometimes in a dream that cannot be forgotten. Jung once recounted a patient's dream. She saw herself descending into an old cellar where there was a covered ancient statue. When she brushed away the dust, the statue's face was her own. That dream, according to Jung, symbolized the turning point of individuation, the first encounter with the true self. We cannot become whole by fleeing the shadow or pretending perfection. We can only become whole by rediscovering ourselves, including the forgotten parts. Modern psychology also recognizes the power of this process. American psychologist Abraham Maslow, though not a disciple of Jung, described a similar stage called self-actualization, when people live true to their deepest nature. The difference is that Jung viewed this journey not just as personal development, but as a sacred right of the soul. To become oneself, you must die in the old ego. An intriguing image Jung used is the mandala, the sacred circle representing wholeness. In countless cultures, the mandala appears as a symbol of cosmic order and inner balance. When his patients drew mandalas in therapy, it was not unconscious art, but a reflection of the self-seeking expression. Anyone who has experienced deep meditation or creation in a flow state knows this feeling. All pieces of the self seem to merge, no boundary between the doer and the doing. That is the moment the self reveals itself, wholeness in action. Notably, the individuation process never ends. It is not a destination, but a rhythm of living. Like breathing in and out, we continually explore, confront, and reconcile, then explore again. Each time we are more honest with ourselves, we move a step closer to the self. Each time we reject a part of ourselves, the journey prolongs. And that is why Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And when you truly step through, something strange happens. The outer world begins to reflect the inner world. Relationships change, work changes, and even the way you see time differs. For you no longer live to chase something, but from the center of your being. Jung believed this is the deepest purpose of human life. Not happiness, not success, but wholeness. Number 5. Training the mind, according to Jung. After we have journeyed through seeing the shadow, understanding the archetypes operating in the unconscious, and beginning to walk the path of individuation, returning to our true self, the natural question arises: how to live with that awareness every day? How to not only understand the mind, but train it in a way that makes us freer, deeper, and more awakened each day. This is precisely what Carl Jung called the art of training the mind through observation, imagination, and living with the unconscious. For Jung, knowledge without practice is mere information. Practice is the transformation of the soul. Unlike many modern psychological schools focused on fixing oneself, Jung saw the mind as a living system. It does not need repair, but listening and training to become wiser. Training the mind, for him, is not forcing positivity or controlling emotions, but learning to observe every movement within us with unconditional awareness. For when you can conscious, like opening a dialogue with the inner parts. Instead of just analyzing dreams or memories, you enter the inner world as both observer and participant. When an image, symbol, or emotion arises, instead of dismissing it, you invite it to sit and ask, "Who are you? What have you come to teach me?" The way Jung guided patients in this is like a form of dialogue meditation, without force, without interference, just profound listening. And the miracle happens. The unconscious begins to respond. In modern terms, active imagination can be understood as a method to connect with the creative subconscious. When you journal, draw, compose, meditate, or simply let the mind drift freely without judgment, you are allowing the unconscious to voice itself. Many creators like David Lynch, Hayao Miyazaki, or even Steve Jobs described their creative process as receiving ideas from a deep inner place beyond control. That is the harmony between consciousness and the unconscious that Jung called a trained mind. Alongside active imagination, another indispensable tool is dream journaling. Jung viewed dreams as the private language of the soul. Every dream, no matter how strange or fragmented, is a message from the unconscious to consciousness, reflecting what we have not yet seen in waking life. When you wake, record every image, emotion, symbol that appears, an animal, a room, a lost person. Do not rush to interpret, just note it. Then ask, what does this mean to me today? By doing this daily, you are training the mind in a special muscle, the ability to observe the unconscious. Another element Jung valued is inner stillness. In his era, the concept of mindfulness was not widespread, but Jung early recognized the value of sitting quietly and looking inward. Training the mind is not to avoid that inner hell, but to be calm enough to look into it without being consumed. It is in that stillness that we begin to realize every thought is a passing cloud, and the trained mind can become the vast sky rather than just the storm. From a psychological perspective, neuroscientists today have proven what Jung intuited. Maintaining attentive self-observation rewires the brain. Studies on neuroplasticity show that meditation, journaling, and creative imagination activities strengthen connections between brain regions responsible for awareness, emotion, and self-regulation. Meaning that training the mind is not just a spiritual journey, it is also a biological one where mind and brain evolve together. Ultimately, training the mind according to Jung is a lifelong journey. It is not a series of techniques, but a way of living, with the awareness that the unconscious is always present, always whispering, always guiding. Every dream, every emotion, every strange coincidence is a message from the mind. When you learn to listen to it, you no longer move through life blindly, but with life, with your own flow. And that is when the mind is trained to freedom, not because you have controlled it, but because you have become its friend. As it closes, what remains is not a map thick with arrows, but a settling feeling in the chest. You begin to hear your own voice speaking to yourself more clearly. No longer rushing to prove, no longer frantically fixing, you stand still long enough to realize what you once thought was. Fate is just mist slowly dissolving before dawn. From that still point, life ceases to roar as a race. It becomes a calm surface where every ripple has reason and a path back. The change does not announce itself. It grows like a sprout pushing through thin soil, patient yet certain. Then one ordinary morning that no one notices, you suddenly understand. The world is the same. Only you have calmed enough to float and weigh just right. If the call within you still echoes, do not silence it. Stay with us on the journey into the unconscious, so that each week, each article, each video becomes another mirror reflecting the soul. Hit subscribe if you want to continue this journey, so the light does not come just once, but stays within you for a long time. There are days when you don't understand why you feel so exhausted, not because of work or others, but because of your own emotions. Something small happens, yet your heart aches, your throat tightens. A seemingly harmless comment makes you angry, defensive, or silently hurt. You ask yourself, Why did I react so strongly? I didn't want to. Carl Jung once said that most people do not truly live. They are operated by the unconscious. That means in most moments, we don't actually choose. We simply react. And those reactions, anger, fear, self-defense, quietly shape the course of our lives. But the miracle is that between stimulus and reaction, there always exists a small pause, a space where you can choose to respond consciously instead of reacting instinctively. In today's video, we'll dive into the journey of train your mind to respond, not react, the path from unconsciousness to awareness. You'll understand why anger, fear, or hurt are not your enemies, but mirrors of the soul. And when you learn to pause, observe, and transform, you don't just control your emotions, you become the creator of your own reality. Stay until the end, because you'll realize true freedom doesn't begin by changing the world out there. It begins the moment you master the world within. Number 1. When the unconscious takes over, every reaction is an unhealed memory. Have you ever lost your temper over a small comment, then later asked yourself, why did I react so strongly? During a meeting, someone gives light feedback, and you suddenly feel attacked. Or in a casual conversation, one remark makes your heart race and your voice rise. It all happens within seconds, and when the emotion passes, you sit there, confused by yourself. Carl Jung called that moment the takeover of the unconscious, when the deeper, unseen parts of your psyche rise to the surface and control your behavior. A reactive outburst rarely comes from the present. It's the echo of repressed emotional memories from the past. Every time you react, you're not responding to the person in front of you. You're responding to a part of yourself that was once hurt, silenced, or forced to survive. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When someone touches that wound, you're not reacting to their words. You're reacting to a memory your soul still carries. We all have moments like that. When criticized, we hear an old voice saying, "You're never good enough." When rejected, we see again the eyes that once turned away. When misunderstood, we relive the child who was once falsely accused. So reaction isn't wrong. It's simply your soul saying, "Look here, something still hurts." But if we let reaction drive us, we'll keep replaying the same old stories, hurting others the way we were once hurt. We think we're living in the present, but we're actually being led by fragments of unhealed memory. A friend once told me she often burst into tears and lost control whenever she felt misunderstood. Later, she realized it came from a childhood memory, being blamed for stealing something she never took. No one apologized, and she learned to swallow her tears. So every time she was misunderstood later in life, she wasn't facing the present person. She was facing that little girl inside still crying, "I didn't do anything wrong." Once she realized this, she no longer felt ashamed of her sensitivity. She understood that every tear was her soul reclaiming justice, not from the world, but from herself. Jung said every intense emotion carries within it a truth we're not yet ready to face. Anger might hide the fear of being disrespected. Feeling insulted might signal a lack of self-worth. If you're still enough to observe, every reaction becomes a map pointing the way. Heal here. So instead of suppressing, look directly at it. When an emotion rises, don't rush to interpret, simply notice, "I'm angry, I'm scared, I feel hurt." That simple awareness is the first step to freedom. If we could sum it up in an image, reaction is a flame. Response is the person who can sit by that flame without fear. When the unconscious rules, the fire burns you. When awareness awakens, you learn to use the fire for warmth. That is the line between one who is controlled by emotions and one who uses them as light. Reaction appears when an unacknowledged emotion is touched within you. When someone irritates you, what truly hurts is not them, but the old feeling inside, being ignored, disrespected, unseen. Each time you feel angry, anxious, or triggered, remember, you stand at a crossroads. One path is letting the unconscious lead, to react. The other is to pause and listen, to respond. If you choose the second, you're beginning to train your mind to respond, not react. You're no longer living as a reflex, you're living as a choice. And that's the first step to inner freedom. Because after the moment you pause to breathe, to observe instead of observe what's happening inside. You awaken the part of you that can witness, without judgment, just awareness. Jung called this the shift from unconscious reaction to conscious awareness. And to reach it, you don't need hours of meditation or hundreds of psychology books. You only need to practice the pause. When someone says something hurtful, instead of reacting, breathe deeply. Feel the energy rising in your chest or throat. Don't suppress it, just stay with it. That simple pause changes everything. In that moment, you step out of the old script. You're no longer the scared child or the person who must prove themselves. You become simply present, aware, and capable of choice. A viewer of our channel once shared her story about learning this. She was a young manager under constant pressure. Before, if someone made a mistake, she would instantly explode and later regret it. "I thought I was just hot-tempered," she said, "but actually, I'd never learned how to pause." One day, in a meeting, an employee made a costly error. She felt the anger rising, but this time, she remembered, between stimulus and response, there's always a gap. She stayed silent for 10 seconds, took a deep breath, felt her heartbeat. In those 10 seconds, her anger dissolved into clarity. She responded differently, asking, "What can we learn from this?" After that meeting, that same employee stayed loyal to her for years. "For the first time," she said, "I felt real power, not when I spoke louder, but when I was calm enough to say nothing." Modern neuroscience confirms what Jung intuited long ago. Emotions arise from the limbic system, the brain's survival center. When triggered, the amygdala sends a danger signal that makes us react automatically. But when we pause to observe instead of reacting, the prefrontal cortex, the seat of awareness, activates. In just a few seconds, the brain shifts from reflex to reflection, and in that moment, you reclaim your freedom, unconscious or conscious, react or respond. Think of everyday situations, a text that irritates you, a coworker who disappoints you, a heated argument. Before, you might have reacted, saying words you regret, or withdrawing completely. But now, you can choose differently. You can breathe, pause, and speak only when your mind is clear. This is training your mind, not to become cold, but to become conscious. When you realize there's always a space between trigger and action, you begin to live with a kind of freedom the world rarely knows. It's the freedom of someone who can feel without drowning. Angry, but not impulsive. Sad, but not broken. Attacked, but calm enough not to attack back. Such a person isn't emotionless. They are conscious enough to guide their emotions. And from there, everything in your life begins to change. The way you speak, listen, see others. Because someone who has learned to respond, not react, has begun to master what once controlled them. Number 3, reaction belongs to the ego. Response belongs to the self. Once you learn to pause between reaction and response, something deeper begins to emerge. Who within you is reacting? Because sometimes you pause not only to see your emotions, but to see the self behind them. This is where the real journey begins, from the ego to the self. Carl Jung said, "The ego is the center of the field of consciousness, while the self is the totality of the whole psyche, both conscious and unconscious." The ego is a small part of consciousness, the part that wants control, to be right, to feel safe. But the self is much larger. It doesn't need to win or to be recognized. It only seeks understanding and wholeness. When you react, it's the ego that's in charge. It's afraid of being hurt, so it attacks. It's afraid of being belittled, so it defends. It's afraid of losing control, so it must have the last word. But when you respond, the self awakens. It doesn't care about right or wrong, only about truth. Imagine two people receiving criticism. The first reacts, arguing, defending, even attacking. The second breathes, pauses, and simply says, "I'll think about that." The first acts from ego, afraid of being diminished. The second acts from self, strong enough not to need protection. A friend once told me she spent years learning to distinguish these two voices within. Whenever someone criticized me, she said, I'd hear two inner responses. One screaming to prove I was right, and another softer one just wanting to understand why it hurt. At first, she always followed the louder voice, but she realized each time she ended up more exhausted and distant from herself. Until one day, she began listening to the softer one, the voice of the self. It wasn't loud, but it was always wise. From then, she learned that sometimes silence is the greatest strength. In the Bible, there's a story about Jesus and the crowd ready to stone a woman accused of adultery. Everyone reacted, full of anger and judgment. Simply recognizing this shifts you from reaction to awareness. Jung believed that only when the ego bows, the self is born. And when that happens, you begin to see the world not through the eyes of fear, but through the eyes of wisdom and compassion. Ultimately, remember, reaction is the voice of fear, response is the voice of love. One contracts to protect, the other expands to understand. Between the two, you can choose who leads you. If you've ever had a moment when you chose silence and understanding instead of reacting, share that story. Maybe your experience will help someone else learn to respond, not react, and find peace within themselves. But once the ego steps back, a deeper layer begins to stir, where your strongest emotions no longer come from the need to control, but from the shadow. Number 4, the shadow within, the root of every reflex. Carl Jung once said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." Every person carries a shadow, the place that holds their suppressed anger, jealousy, shame, fear, and all the aspects of themselves they once rejected. The shadow doesn't disappear just because we refuse to see it. On the contrary, the more we deny it, the more it demands to be seen, often through the intense reactions we don't understand. When someone triggers a strong emotion in you, it's often not because their action is truly that serious. It's because they've touched an unseen darkness within you. The people who try hardest to appear nice, calm, or in control often carry the strongest shadows, because whatever we repress most fiercely will find a way to surface, A child scolded for talking too much learns to stay quiet and carries the shadow of expression. A woman shamed for being too ambitious learns to act humble, but in the dark, her powerful drive still fights to live again. Jung called this the compensatory mechanism of the unconscious. Whatever is pushed down must rise up to balance itself. I once knew a woman who prided herself on being very calm. She never raised her voice, always spoke politely, and saw emotions as weakness. But one day, when a co-worker criticized her in public, she suddenly slammed the table, burst into tears, and fell into crisis. "I don't understand why I did that," she said. "I've never lost control before." But the truth was that anger wasn't new. It had been there for years, just waiting to be seen. That was her shadow, the part of her she'd buried in order to be pleasant and proper. Look at daily life. When someone brags and it annoys you, perhaps the pride within you wants to be acknowledged. When you judge someone as selfish, maybe you're denying your own need to prioritize yourself. When you feel irritated by someone's freedom, maybe your soul envies their courage to live as they please. The shadow never lies. It simply points out, here's something inside you still unresolved. Imagine holding a ball underwater. The more you push it down, the harder it is to hold. But the moment you release it, it rises naturally. The shadow works the same way. When you dare to look at it, listen to it, and say, "I see you, and I don't hate you anymore," the repressed energy dissolves, and you feel lighter. The shadow cannot be destroyed, only integrated. Jung called this the integration of the shadow, the process by which a person becomes whole again by reclaiming the parts once abandoned. When we dare to face our anger, jealousy, weakness, or desire, we stop being controlled by them in the unconscious. Instead of being victims of reflex, we become guides of our own energy. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you want to understand yourself, don't just look at what you're proud of, look at what you judge in others. The person who irritates you most is the one unconsciously showing you the part of yourself you've rejected. And when you can admit, yes, I have that in me too, a piece of darkness turns to light. Try this small practice. Next time someone hurts or angers you, instead of blaming them, ask yourself, which shadow in me has been touched? Maybe it's the part that fears being disrespected, the part that always wants love, or the part that feels invisible. Simply asking the question begins the transformation. Like in Greek mythology, the hero Theseus could not defeat the Minotaur without entering the dark labyrinth. Our shadow is the same. It is the labyrinth, and the monster inside is not the enemy, but the imprisoned soul, longing to be freed. That is the turning point of inner freedom. When you stop running from the darkness and start holding its hand as you walk together. Number 5. Learning to observe emotions as an outsider. Something miraculous happens when you dare to face the darkness and see the parts you once denied. Emotions stop being frightening. They're no longer here to destroy you, but to teach you. And at this stage, the real lesson begins, learning to observe emotions as an outsider. Carl Jung viewed emotion as the language of the soul. Every time you feel anger, hurt, or fear, your soul is trying to speak to you in the only way it knows, through feeling. But most of us don't listen. We react instead. We fight, run, or try to rationalize. So rather than understanding the message, we get trapped in the emotional wave, thinking we are the emotion. But between I am angry and I feel anger lies the entire distance of consciousness. The moment you can name an emotion without becoming it, you shift from unconsciousness to awareness. You are no longer the emotion, you are the one seeing it. Imagine sitting by a river. Emotions are boats floating by. One carries anger, one fear, one sadness. If you jump onto a boat, you'll be carried away. But if you sit still and simply say, this is anger, this is fear, you become the observer, no longer the prisoner of the flow. In a Jungian therapy session I once attended, a teacher shared a story about a woman learning this skill. She was a high school teacher under constant pressure. One day in class, a student rudely interrupted her, making the whole class laugh. She felt her face flush, her heart race, anger and shame crashing in at once. "I almost yelled," she said, "but then I remembered, I'm feeling anger and hurt. I'm not the anger itself." She took a deep breath and calmly said, "You can step outside for a few minutes and come back when you're ready to learn." After class, she realized it was the first time she hadn't been ruled by emotion. Instead, the emotion helped her understand herself. "I wasn't really angry at that student," she said. "I was angry because I felt disrespected, just like the child I once was, being scolded in front of others." When she understood that, the anger dissolved, replaced by compassion. Jung once said, "Emotion is the chief source of consciousness." There is no change from darkness to light or from inertia to movement without emotion. If you dare to stay with an emotion instead of running away, you'll discover that beneath anger lies a message about boundaries. Beneath fear, a call for courage. Beneath pain, a seed of healing. Neuroscience confirms this too. When you feel anger or fear, the amygdala in your brain triggers an automatic danger response. But the moment you stop and label the emotion, "I'm angry," "I'm sad," your prefrontal cortex, the rational, conscious part, activates, calming the storm. Simply naming what you feel begins to restore control. That's why people who practice emotional observation daily become increasingly peaceful and clear. They don't let emotions take over, but let the mind and soul communicate. You can try this in daily life. When emotions rise, breathe and ask, "What is this emotion called? Where do I feel it in my body?" If it could speak, what would it say? Maybe it will say, "I'm afraid of being abandoned. I want to be seen." Or, "I'm tired of always being strong." When you hear that voice, you're touching your soul. A beautiful image Jung used was the inner witness, the observer within. This part doesn't judge, defend, or criticize. It simply sees, and the more it sees, the more the darkness brightens. When you practice standing in this position, no emotion, however strong, can dominate you. Every feeling becomes an object of understanding, not fear. Even once a day, pause, breathe, and observe your emotions like a stranger. Maybe when you're stuck in traffic, hearing something unpleasant, or reading a text that stings. Each time you do, you're training your mind to form a new reflex. Respond, not react. Because in the moment you realize you have an emotion, instead of being the emotion, you've already won. Not against others, but against your own primitive reflex. That is when you master the highest art of the mind, to observe in order to choose, not react in order to survive. As you watch this, Ask yourself, in the last moment you were swept away by emotion, what was really asking to be seen? If you understand that, comment with one word that names the emotion you're learning to observe most, so that very word becomes your reminder on this journey of awakening. Number 6. Transforming emotional energy into awareness. Have you ever wondered what happens after you can see an emotion without being swept away by it? That's when a deeper process begins, where emotional energy stops being reaction and becomes material for spiritual transformation. Carl Jung called this process the alchemy of the soul. In ancient alchemy, people believed they could turn lead into gold. But for Jung, lead wasn't a metal. It was the heavy, chaotic emotions within us. When we're brave enough to stay with them, instead of escaping or reacting, those emotions slowly transform into deeper understanding of ourselves. When you don't react immediately, emotional energy doesn't explode outward, it stays within, to be transformed. A repressed anger can poison you, but an observed anger can strengthen you. The unconscious person uses emotional energy to fight life. The conscious person uses it to understand, awaken, and grow. Imagine emotions as waves in the ocean. If you panic and resist, the waves drown you. But if you let yourself float and watch their rhythm, you realize waves are temporary, and beneath them, the deep sea is always calm. When you live from that depth, emotional energy stops being a storm and becomes a current carrying you home to yourself. And in that moment, the lead inside you begins turning into gold. I once heard the story of a mother who, after divorce, raised her child alone. She worked hard and tried to stay strong. But every time her child made a small mistake, she exploded in anger. Afterward, she would cry, ashamed and guilty. Why do I hurt the person I love most? She wondered. One night after her child fell asleep, she sat alone in the kitchen and wrote down her feelings. Beneath her anger, she found fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear her child would suffer as she once did. From that day on, whenever anger rose, she paused, breathed, and asked, "What is this anger trying to tell me?" When she saw the feeling instead of becoming it, the energy stopped burning and began to dissolve. She realized she wasn't a bad mother. She was a woman learning to love without repeating her wounds. That's the power of awareness. When emotional energy is held in silence and observation, it turns into insight. You stop asking, "How do I get rid of this anger?" and start asking, "What is this anger telling me?" And when the question changes, the energy changes. Emotion stops being a flood that drowns you and becomes a gentle stream leading back to consciousness. Jung said, "Emotion is energy in motion. If you react, that energy and love yourself even in your imperfect moments. Number 7. Respond as an act of compassion, the highest level of awareness. At the deepest level of awareness, responding is no longer a skill, it becomes an expression of compassion. Because only when you truly understand why you once reacted can you be gentle with how others still react. Carl Jung said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking." Those who react see the world through fear, fear of being hurt, left behind, or losing control. But those who have learned to respond see the world through compassion, compassion for their old selves, and for others still unconsciously struggling in pain. A psychologist once told the story of the most profound therapy session of her career. Her patient was a woman who had suffered years of abuse, carrying immense anger and fear. In one session, the woman suddenly screamed, insulted, and slammed the table. Every instinct in the therapist wanted to defend, to prove, to end the session. But instead of reacting, she took a deep breath and said softly, "I know. Someone must have hurt you this way before." The woman froze, then burst into tears. Her rage dissolved into grief. Because the therapist didn't see an attacker, she saw a wounded soul crying to be understood. That is the power of responding at the highest level. When you no longer need to be right, to win, or to be acknowledged, you only wish to understand. When your awareness becomes wide enough to hold the shadows of others, you cease being a victim of reaction and become a healer through your presence. Imagine the mind of someone who knows how to respond as a calm lake. Others may throw stones, creating ripples, but soon the water returns to stillness. Its depth is too great to be disturbed. Reactive people live on the surface, where every pebble stirs waves. But those who respond live in depth, where everything is absorbed, transformed, and reflected back as clarity and compassion. Look at how Malala Yousafzai faced her fate. At 15, she was shot for demanding girls' right to education. The bullet pierced her head, but could not kill her spirit. When she awoke, she did not call for revenge. Instead, she said words that silenced the world. "I do not hate the men who shot me. I want their children to go to school." In that single sentence lies the essence of responding, not from the wound, but from love. She didn't see the world through fear, but through understanding. Because only when the heart is free from hatred can it create true change. Jung believed that love is not a soft emotion, but the highest form of consciousness. When you see the unconsciousness in others, you can no longer judge them, because you recognize yourself in them. That understanding melts every conflict. You no longer need to forgive, because there is nothing left to forgive. You simply see that everything humans do, even the hurtful things, comes from ignorance, from shadows unseen. Compassion arises naturally from that understanding. At this level of awareness, responding is no longer an action, it's a state of being. Such a person doesn't try to appear calm, they are calm. They don't try to forgive, they are forgiveness. When attacked, they don't retreat out of weakness, but out of wisdom, knowing that another's anger isn't aimed at them, but at their own unhealed pain. Perhaps the final lesson of responding doesn't lie in philosophy, but in everyday moments. When you're misunderstood, yet choose gentle words. When your loved one explodes, and you choose silence instead of fire. When you realize that the one who hurt you is simply another soul afraid. In that moment, Compassion stops being a concept and becomes your reflex. You no longer force yourself to forgive. You simply feel tenderness, and that is the highest state of awareness Jung pointed to, when the heart can see another's darkness and still keep its own light. Maybe that is the destination of this journey. Train your mind to respond, not react. When you no longer use willpower to control yourself, but use love to understand yourself and the world, then every reaction dissolves in the light of awareness. You don't need to stay calm. You are calm. In a world of quick reactions and noise, those who know how to respond are not emotionless. They are those who walk slowly through the storm. They don't try to be calm. They see everything with open awareness and an understanding heart. Because they know every impulsive urge is the soul's invitation to become deeper, softer, freer. Those who learn to respond, not react, no longer live as reflexes. They live as creators. They don't let emotions take over. They let emotions teach them. They don't avoid pain. They turn it into wisdom. And when compassion becomes their natural reflex, they not only heal themselves, they bring peace to everyone around them. If this video helps you find a part of yourself in that journey, the journey of pausing, understanding, and loving through awareness, share it.